A boot slammed into a metal dumpster and the whole alley rang like a struck bell. A woman flinched against the wall. A chipped plate shook in her hands, scraps sliding toward the edge. She hunched over it, shielding it with both arms. A one-eyed cat pressed against her ankle and hissed at the dark. Her knuckles were split. Her apron was filthy. Her hands trembled. She had been eating garbage behind a dead diner for longer than anyone should. Then a shadow fell across her. Big. Military big. Leather vest, thick arms, heavy boots planted in the dirt. And when he crouched down and she looked up, she whispered one word. A name. Dom. Because the giant standing over her plate of scraps was her son. So what makes 2,000 strangers ride into one desert town for a woman they never met? Stay with me on this one. Now let me back up because you need to understand who this man was before you understand what he did. His name was Dominic Reyes. Everybody just called him Dom, 43 years old. Road captain for the Hells Angels, which is a fancy way of saying that when 100 bikes rolled down a highway, he was the one out front deciding where they went and how fast. Men followed him, not because he yelled, because he didn't have to. He was the kind of quiet that made loud men shut up. He'd pulled off Interstate 15 that afternoon for one reason. Gas. That was it. He wasn't looking for anything. He wasn't looking for anyone. He'd been on the road 2 days, coming back from a run up north, and Barstow was just a dot on the map with a cheap pump and a bad cup of coffee. He filled his tank. He was about to swing his leg back over the bike when he heard the sound. That clang. Metal on metal from behind the shuttered diner across the lot. The place had been closed for years. Windows soaped over. Weeds coming up through the parking lot. Most men would have ignored it. A cat, a raccoon, some drifter. Dom walked toward it anyway. And here's the thing about Dom. He always walked toward the sound. That habit had saved his life more than once. He came around the corner of the building and he stopped cold. There was a woman back there, small, bent over a cracked plate, eating with her fingers fast, the way a person eats when they're ashamed of being hungry. There was a cat at her feet with one eye. And when she heard his boots, she pulled the plate against her chest and turned away, like she was used to people taking things from her. Dom didn't move. He just stared, because something about the shape of her shoulders, something about the gray hair pulled back in that same tight knot. "Ma," he said. The word came out cracked. He hadn't said it in 12 years. The woman went still. Slowly she lifted her face, and there she was, older, thinner. A bruise going yellow on her cheekbone, but it was her, Rosa Reyes, his mother. The woman who'd raised him alone, who'd worked 2 jobs, who'd vanished out of his life 12 years back after a fight so stupid he could barely remember what it was about. She looked at her son standing there in leather and road dust, and she did the worst thing a mother can do. She tried to hide the plate. She tried to hide that she'd been eating garbage. "Dominic," she whispered, "you shouldn't see me like this." He crossed the dirt in 3 steps. He didn't grab her. He didn't shout. He got down, right down in the filth beside her, this huge man folding himself onto the ground next to a dumpster. The cat hissed and he let it. He looked at the plate. Cold fries. A half-eaten sandwich somebody had thrown out. And he understood in about 1 second that his mother had been surviving on what other people threw away. "How long?" he asked. His voice was very soft. She didn't answer. "Ma, how long?" "A while," she said, and that word, a while, told him everything. Because a person who's only been down a few days says a few days. A person who says a while has stopped counting because counting hurts too much. Dom reached over. He took a cold fry off her plate and he ate it. He didn't say a word about it. He just shared her food right there in the dirt so she'd know he wasn't above her and he wasn't going to leave. That was the whole message. I'm sitting where you're sitting. They sat like that a long time. The cat calmed down and climbed into Rosa's lap. She called it Biscuit. Said it used to belong to the diner before the diner closed, and when everybody left, the cat stayed and so did she. and the two of them had been looking after each other ever since. She said it like it was normal. Like a woman and a one-eyed cat living behind a dumpster was just how things went. And Dom sat there and felt something start to burn in his chest. Slow, cold. The most dangerous kind of anger there is, not the kind that explodes, the kind that decides, because his mother didn't end up here by accident. Somebody put her here, and he was going to find out who, so he asked her. Gently, he said, "Ma, tell me what happened. Start at the beginning. I've got all night." And she did. It started, she told him, 3 years back. She still had the house then. The little place on 3rd Street, the one Dom grew up in, the one she'd finally paid nearly clean after 30 years. It was hers. It was the one thing that was hers. Then the roof went. A bad winter, water coming through, and the repairs cost more than she had. So she went looking for a small loan, a few $1,000s, and a man in town said he could help. His name was Carl Pruitt. He ran a lending shop out of a strip mall, the kind of place with a bright sign and no questions asked. Rose signed his papers. She trusted him. Why wouldn't she? He smiled at her. He called her ma'am. He told her not to worry about the fine print. But here's the thing about the fine print. It was designed so she could never win. The interest doubled, then doubled again. A $4,000 loan became 11, became 20. Every month she paid, and every month she owed more than before. Pruitt had built a trap and put a smile on the front of it. She started working to keep up, cleaning houses, washing dishes. 18-hour days at her age, running herself into the ground, handing almost every dollar straight to Carl Pruitt. She stopped eating so she could pay him. She sold her furniture. She sold her wedding ring. And it still wasn't enough, because it was never supposed to be enough. Then 2 years in, Pruitt made his real move. He'd buried a clause in those papers. A clause that said if she missed a single payment, the whole debt came due at once and the house was collateral. So 1 month when she was sick and couldn't work, she missed. Just once. And Carl Pruitt took the house. He took the home she'd lived in for 30 years, the home Dom was raised in, and he did it with a piece of paper and a smile. He sold it to a developer inside of a month. Rosa was out on the street with a suitcase and a cat. She was too ashamed to call her son, so she didn't. She drifted. She ended up back at the only place that felt like anything, the old diner where she'd waited tables as a young woman. Closed now. Empty. But the dumpster still filled up from the truck stop next door, and a person could survive on what other people didn't finish. That was where her son found her. When she finished talking, Dom didn't say anything for a while. He just looked out at the desert going dark. Then he stood up, slow, and he brushed off his jeans, and he helped his mother to her feet. "You're not staying here another night," he said. He walked her over to a motel across the road, a low, ugly place with a flickering sign, and he paid cash for a room, and he made sure she ate a real meal, a hot one, sitting at a table like a person. He carried biscuit in himself, tucked under one arm, and the front desk started to say something about no pets, and Dom just looked at him, and the man decided it was fine. He got Rosa settled, clean sheets, a locked door, food in her stomach. She fell asleep almost the second her head touched the pillow, exhausted in a way that goes deeper than one night. Dom sat in the chair by the window and watched her breathe. And for the first time all evening, the danger seemed over. She was safe. She was warm. She had her son back. The worst was behind her. You could almost believe the story was winding down to a quiet, happy ending, right there in a cheap motel room with a one-eyed cat asleep on the bed. Almost. Because around midnight, Dom's phone lit up. Not a call, a text, from a number he didn't know. He opened it, and the burn in his chest went ice cold all over again. It was a photo of that motel, taken from the parking lot just minutes ago, and under it 3 words. "She still owes." Dom stood up so fast the chair fell over. Somebody had followed them. Somebody had watched him walk his mother across that road. and that somebody wanted him to know it. He stepped outside into the cold and he looked across the empty lot, and down at the far end, under a busted streetlight, a black pickup truck was parked with its engine running and its lights off, just sitting there, watching. This was the moment the whole thing changed, because up until now Dom had thought this was about a debt, a crooked loan, a stolen house. Bad, sure, but the kind of bad you fix with money and lawyers. It wasn't about that anymore. That truck told him something. Carl Pruitt didn't just take the house and walk away. He was still on her, still squeezing. And now he knew Rosa's son had shown up, a big man in a leather vest, and instead of backing off, Pruitt had sent someone to make a point. To say, I own her and you can't change that, and I want you to feel how much you can't. This wasn't a business dispute now. It was a threat against his mother's life. And the man making it clearly thought he was untouchable. Clearly thought that whoever this son was, he could be scared off with one photo in the night. Carl Pruitt had no idea who he'd just poked. Dom didn't walk toward the truck. He wanted to. Every muscle in him wanted to cross that lot and tear the door off. But he didn't. Because Dom was a road captain. And a road captain doesn't move alone when he can move 100 deep. He just stood there in the light where they could see him, and he stared at that truck until, after a long minute, it dropped into gear and rolled away slow, like it had made its point. Then Dom made one phone call. He called the president of his chapter. A man named Tank woke him out of a dead sleep, and he told him in a low, flat voice everything. The dumpster, the scraps, the loan, the house, the bruise on his mother's face, the photo, the truck. There was a long silence on the line. Then Tank said only, "Where are you?" "Barstow." "Sit tight," Tank said. "I'm making calls." And here's where I have to tell you what kind of world Dom lived in. Because if you don't understand it, what happens next won't make sense. These men, the ones people cross the street to avoid, the ones in the leather and the patches, they have a code. And the very center of that code is this: you do not touch a brother's family. You do not put your hands on a mother. Rosa Reyes had a son who wore the patch, and that made Rosa Reyes something like sacred. An injury to her was an injury to all of them. Tank hung up and started dialing, and each man he called hung up and called 5 more. It moved across the desert that night like fire through dry grass. From the chapters in California up into Nevada, out into Arizona. A road captain's mother was eating garbage behind a dumpster because a con man broke her, and the con man was still twisting the knife. By dawn, the highways were already filling. If you've made it this far and your throat's a little tight, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button and stick with me, because I promise you the best part of this story is still coming. Now, 2,200 motorcycles do not move quietly. You feel them before you hear them. A low shake in the ground in your teeth. Then the sound comes over the ridge, and it just keeps coming and coming until it fills the whole sky. That's what Barstow woke up to. Rosa woke up to it too. She came to the motel window with Biscuit in her arms, and she looked out at the road, and she saw a river of chrome and leather pouring into her broken little town, and she had no idea it was for her. She turned to her son, frightened. "Dominic, what is this?" Dom came and stood beside her. He put an arm around her thin shoulders. "That's family, Ma," he said. "That's everybody. They came for you." She started to cry, not because she understood yet, because in 12 years on the ground nobody had come for anything, and now here were 2,000 strangers riding in out of the desert, and something in her that had gone hard just to survive finally cracked open. They filled the streets. They filled the gas stations and the empty lots. And they did not come to burn the town down, whatever you might expect. That's the part that surprises people. Tank had put out the word, and the word was clear. Nobody breaks the law. Nobody gives that con man an excuse to call this a biker mob. We do this smart. We do this so it sticks. And that's exactly what they did. The first thing that happened before anything else was breakfast. About 40 of them rolled up to the motel and set up folding tables in the parking lot, and they cooked eggs, bacon, whole pots of coffee. And they sat Rosa raised down at the head of the table, this woman who'd been eating trash the night before, and they served her. 2,000 hardened men taking turns making sure she had a full plate. One old biker with a gray beard down to his chest knelt by her chair and fed scraps of bacon to Biscuit and said, "Good cat, loyal cat, we heard about you too." Rosa couldn't eat at first. She just looked around at all these faces, and every one of them nodded at her like she was somebody, like she mattered. And that alone, before a single other thing happened, was worth more than the money. But the money was coming too. Because while Rosa ate, Tank and Dom went to work, and they did it the right way. First stop was a lawyer. The Angels had one on retainer, a sharp woman named Delgado who'd gotten more than a few of them out of trouble over the years. They handed her Rosa's paperwork, the loan documents, the foreclosure notice, everything Rosa had kept crumpled in a plastic bag through all of it. Delgado read it in the motel lobby with a cup of that biker coffee going cold beside her. And slowly, a hard little smile crept across her face. "Boys," she said, "this is dirty. This is so dirty it's actually beautiful. This interest rate is illegal in this state, flat out illegal. He's got clauses in here that no judge is going to enforce. And this foreclosure, he didn't even file it right. He cut a corner because he figured a broke old woman would never fight it. She tapped the page. She can fight it, and she'll win." Now here's the thing. They could have just handed it to the lawyers and let it grind through court for a year. But that's not how you make a point. That's not how you make sure Carl Pruitt never does this to another mother in this town again. So they did two things at once. The legal thing and the loud thing. The legal thing was Delgado filing to void the loan and reverse the foreclosure, going after Pruitt for fraud, for elder abuse, for a stack of violations as long as your arm. The loud thing was 2,200 motorcycles. Around noon, they rolled out from the motel in one long column, and they went to Carl Pruitt's lending shop in the strip mall. And they parked, that's all, they parked. They filled that entire strip mall lot and the streets around it, and they shut off their engines and they stood there, leather and patches and folded arms, silent, just looking at his bright sign and his glass door. They didn't break a window. They didn't say a word to a customer. They didn't have to. Because no one, and I mean no one, was going to walk into Carl Pruitt's shop to sign a loan with 2,000 Hell's Angels standing in the parking lot watching the door. Inside, Pruitt lost his mind. You could see him through the glass on the phone, pacing, sweating through his shirt. He called the police. Of course he did. And this is the part I love. The police came. A few cruisers. And the officer in charge, a sergeant named Mills, got out and looked at 2,000 men standing perfectly still on public property, breaking exactly 0 laws, and he understood the situation immediately. Then Delgado walked up to him with a folder and said, "Officer, before you do anything, you should probably read what this man's been doing to elderly residents in your town." And she handed him the file. Sergeant Mills stood there in the lot and he read it. The illegal rates, the stolen house, and it turned out Mills had a mother too. It turned out half the cops in Barstow had watched people they knew get chewed up by Carl Pruitt over the years, and nobody had ever handed them proof they could use. Now somebody had. Mills closed the folder, looked at the sweating man behind the glass and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Nobody here's breaking any law that I can see. These gentlemen are welcome to stand on public property as long as they like." Then he turned to his officers. "But I want a car to run these documents down to the DA. Today." Pruitt watched his own protection walk away from him. That was the first payoff, the first crack in the wall. But it wasn't the end. Because the debt was still on the books and the house was still gone, and a scared man is a dangerous man. Carl Pruitt had one card left, and around 3 that afternoon he played it. He came out of his shop, flanked by 2 big guys, hired muscle, the kind of men who'd been in that black pickup the night before. And Pruitt walked to the edge of the lot with a piece of paper in his shaking hand, and he held it up, and he shouted at the wall of bikers. "She signed this. You hear me? She signed. It's legal. Every one of you can go to hell. This is a legally binding contract, and I will have every last one of you arrested for harassment." The crowd didn't move, didn't make a sound, and out of that silence one man walked forward, just one. Dom. He walked across that lot alone, slow, and he stopped a few feet from Pruitt, and the 2 hired men shifted like they might do something, and Dom looked at them, and they decided against it. Then Dom looked at the paper in Pruitt's hand. "That the loan?" Dom asked, quiet. "That's the contract," Pruitt spat. "Signed by Rosa Reyes. And I don't care who you people are. You can't just tear up a debt." "You're right," Dom said. "We can't." That threw Pruitt for a second. "But you can," Dom said. And then Dom did the thing nobody expected. He didn't threaten the man. He reached into his vest and he pulled out an envelope, thick, and he held it out. "There's cash in there," Dom said. "The men raised it this morning. It's the full amount you say she owes. Every dollar of your fake number, 20,000 and change." He tossed it. It landed at Pruitt's feet. "So now she doesn't owe you anything. It's paid, in full, in front of 2,000 witnesses and a police sergeant. You've got no debt to collect anymore. There's nothing left to hold over her." Pruitt stared at the envelope. He didn't understand. He thought he'd won. He'd been ready for a fight, and instead the biker had just paid him off. "But here's the other thing," Dom went on, and his voice dropped low, so low that Pruitt had to lean in to hear it, and the whole crowd leaned in with him. "That lawyer over there, she's already filed to have this whole loan thrown out as illegal, which it is. So when the court voids it, and it will, you're going to have to give that 20,000 back, to my mother, with interest, the legal kind this time." Dom almost smiled. "You just took a payment on a debt a judge is about to erase. You want to know what that makes you? That makes you a man who now owes Rosa Reyes $20,000. And you handed us the proof yourself, in front of a cop on video. Because up on the roof of the strip mall and in a dozen hands in the crowd, phones had been recording the whole time. Every word Pruitt shouted, every claim he made, all of it. Pruitt's face went from red to white. He'd walked out to win, and he'd just confessed on camera to running an illegal loan, to taking a payment on it, and everyone watching knew it. He looked around at the silent wall of men, at the police sergeant holding his file, at the lawyer writing something down, and for the first time Carl Pruitt understood that there was no smile that was going to get him out of this one. He turned and ran back inside and locked the glass door, like a lock was going to help him. It did not help him. Over the next 72 hours, the whole thing came down on Carl Pruitt like a mountain. Delgado's filing hit the court, and the judge took one look at the loan and voided it entirely, illegal from the start. Then came the foreclosure reversed, because Pruitt had cut that corner and it made the whole sale defective. The developer who'd bought Rosa's house didn't want a lawsuit and a wall of bikers, so he sold the house right back at cost, and the men, they covered the gap. Pass the hat again. 2,200 men, $20 here, 50 there, and it was done. But the DA wasn't finished. Because once the story got out, other people came forward. It turned out Rosa wasn't the only one. There was a whole line of them. Old folks, sick folks, working people, all of them chewed up by Carl Pruitt over the years, all of them too ashamed or too scared to speak. Now they weren't. Now there was a lawyer taking names and a sergeant taking statements and 2,000 witnesses who'd seen the man confess in a parking lot. Carl Pruitt was arrested that Friday. Fraud, elder abuse, predatory lending, a stack of charges. They walked him out of that same strip mall in cuffs, and the street was lined with people, regular Barstow people who'd come out to watch. Nobody cheered. They just stood there, quiet, the way you stand when something that should have happened a long time ago finally happens. And Rosa Reyes got her house back. Now I want to slow down here at the end because the loud part of this story is the part everybody remembers, the 2,000 bikes and the man in cuffs. But that's not the part that matters most. The part that matters most is quieter. It was a few days later. The angels were rolling out, chapter by chapter, back to their own states and their own lives. Before they went, they'd done a little more. They'd fixed that roof on 3rd Street, the one that started this whole thing 3 years ago. Half a day's work for men who knew how to work with their hands. They'd filled the kitchen with food. Somebody had left an envelope on the counter with enough in it to get Rosa back on her feet, and nobody would say who. And on the last morning, Dom sat with his mother on the front porch of the house he grew up in. The house that was hers again, free and clear. Biscuit was asleep in a patch of sun on the step, one eye shut, the other one gone but at peace. Rosa had a plate on her lap, a real plate, not chipped this time. Eggs and toast, warm, that Dom had made her. She wasn't eating scraps behind a dumpster anymore. She was eating breakfast in her own home in the sun with her son. She looked at him for a long time. 12 years they'd lost, over a fight neither of them could even really remember. 12 years she'd been too proud to call, and 12 years he'd been too stubborn, and it had almost cost them everything. "Why'd you do all this?" she finally said. "You could have just given me money. You didn't have to bring the whole world down on that man." Dom thought about it. Then he took a piece of toast off her plate, the same way he'd taken that cold fry off her plate in the dirt behind the diner, and he ate it and he said, "Because you sat back there for years thinking nobody would come. I needed you to see how wrong that was. I needed the whole town to see it. So it never happens to you again. And so it never happens to anybody else in this place again." Rosa didn't say anything to that. She just reached over and put her hand on her son's huge scarred hand, this hand that had done hard things, and she held it. And that was it. That was the whole thing. A man stopped for gas, heard a noise behind a dumpster, and walked toward the sound the way he always did. And it turned out to be his mother. And instead of walking away, he sat down in the dirt beside her and shared her plate. Everything else, the 2,000 bikes, the lawyer, the arrest, the house, all of it came from that one small thing. A son who refused to eat while his mother went hungry. A son who refused to let her believe, for even one more night, that she was alone in the world. She'd spent years being told she was worth nothing, worth less than the interest on a loan, worth less than a signature on a crooked man's paper. And it took 2,200 strangers riding out of the desert to tell her the truth, that she was worth all of it, that she always had been. So the next time you hear those bikes come over a ridge, and you feel it in your teeth, and you cross the street a little faster, maybe remember Rosa Reyes on her porch with her cat and her warm plate and her son's hand in hers. Because sometimes the roughest-looking people in the world are carrying the biggest hearts. And sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood. Sometimes it's the ones who show up, 2,000 strong, for a woman they never even met.